So picture this, you have your coffee, tea, matcha in hand, and you go to sit down to do your makeup. Maybe you're just playing with some makeup, maybe you're getting ready for like another long day of work. Either way, this is your chance to sit down and have a mini makeup therapy session. So you're sitting there and then your foundation that you usually use, it's not doing what it's supposed to do on your face. Whatever. So then you move on to your concealer, and then that is also not sitting the way that it's supposed to. So you go down step by step, and then with each step, your makeup just starts looking worse and worse. And at that point, all you want to do is take it all off and start over, but you have like 10 minutes maybe before you have to go. We have all been there. Trust me when I say I have been there many a time. So today we're going to be talking about 5 common mistakes that we make when it comes to our makeup and how I would go about fixing it. If you guys are new here, hello, my name is Christina, and on my channel we talk all about makeup from my own experiences. So if you enjoy this type of content, then I would say consider subscribing. So the first mistake that I see a lot of people making, myself included, is using the influencer amount. So this is essentially putting way too much makeup on. We have all seen this. A lot of different influencers kind of squeeze a ton of makeup on for that shock factor. And I will be the first one to tell you guys, it is not realistic. Of course, your face is going to look like you're wearing a lot of makeup, and it's going to emphasize the texture if it doesn't get to mesh and blend into the skin the way that it was intended to do. And let's be real, these days, at least for me, I don't use makeup intending for it to look like a mask of foundation. There's a time and a place, but for an everyday type of look, I'm not going for that. So how are we going to fix that? My fix, very easy here, is just to go in with less product and then build up from there, especially when the beauty standards in the US are high pigment, high impact when it comes to our products. It is a lot easier to build up than to take away. Because when you take away, that might mean, adding more of something else to cancel out what you've already done. So in turn, that's just a lot of product. I think it's important to note that there is a reason why brands like Merit and Patrick Ta and Makeup by Mario have gained so much traction and attention in the last couple of years. They enhance the face rather than cover it up. And if you have complexion products that you want to glide on more seamlessly with less product, then let me show you a current application technique that I think actually works really well to solve this problem. So what we're going to do is essentially thin out our foundation with a moisturizing essence. This will kind of help to preserve the pigmentation from our foundation, but it also allows us to spread the pigment farther and look more skin-like. So for this demo, we will be using product from the sponsor of today's video, Haru Haru Wonder. So we're going to be using this product right here. This is the Haru Haru Wonder Black Rice Probiotic Barrier Essence. I have talked about this in previous videos before, and it is the perfect mix-in product for this method because it is this super rich texture, but the formula isn't too heavy for my oily skin. And I find when I mix it in with foundations, it kind of just adds like this extra sheen that can sometimes be taken away when I'm using more matte products to make sure my makeup stays in place all day. I still get that longevity, but I also get that natural sheen look. This product also has probiotic ingredients and has a slight exfoliating effect, which in turn helps if you have any texture on your skin, which can also cause your makeup not to sit as nicely. Currently, as you guys can see, I have a couple of different little breakouts going on all over my skin, different textures on different areas, and I love this essence not only because it nourishes my skincare barrier and repairs it, but it can also exfoliate dead skin to allow for my acne to start to heal without it having to dry on my skin beforehand. So for this demo, I am going to be using the essence and mixing it with my Dior foundation stick so I can really show you guys how it transforms foundations. We're going to be doing the foundation by itself on one side so you guys can see what it looks like, and then we're going to mix it on the other side. So I'm going to put this on the back of my hand, and we're going to be mixing this on the back of my hand because it's just a lot easier to control. So in doing this, it allows you to make a stick foundation, or maybe even just a more matte foundation, a bit more creamy, and that pigment is still there as you can see, but it creates a more malleable formula for you to use, and it gives you the same amount of flawless coverage but with less product. And I'm actually going to be using a fluffy brush here just to spread the product out onto the skin. I like using a fluffy brush for this because I find that sometimes with a dense brush, it kind of forces you to blend the foundation in one area, and as you're blending it out in that smaller area of the skin, it starts to dry down, so it kind of forces you to use more product. Whereas with the fluffy brush, you get lighter coverage, more even, and you have more time to like blend it in to the skin. All right, so there you can see the foundation has been blended into the skin here, and it still, in my opinion, looks very skin-like. Obviously, all of my acne scarring and like sunspots and stuff are not as noticeable on this side of the face. I love whenever my makeup looks undetectable and I can kind of build on thinner layers on top of it, and the whole process just kind of looks more seamless on the skin. So now for comparison's sake, I'm going to be taking my foundation stick on the same fluffy brush, and we're just going to apply this by itself without using the Haru Haru essence, just so I can show you guys a little bit of the difference that it makes. And whether you have a foundation or something in your possession that maybe you don't like the finish of it as much, maybe it's a bit drier for what you're looking for, or maybe it's not as skin-like as you want it to be, this little technique I think really helps with that. But even on the flip side, if you have a foundation that you really like I do, I love this Dior foundation stick, but sometimes you just want the same amount of coverage, but you want a little bit of a different finish, then this allows you to transform that finish without having to go and use a completely different product. All right, so here is this side of the face with just the foundation versus this side where we have the mixture going on. So this side of my face, right off the bat, I can tell it looks a lot more matte than this side of the face. I feel like this definitely looks more skin-like, and because this foundation naturally is a little bit more of like that velvet matte finish, you can see a lot more mattifying going on. And sometimes if you build up on a mattifying type of complexion product, it can sort of emphasize those pores and any texture or fine lines that you may have. Also, another way I like to use this Haru Haru essence is to prep the skin for makeup. So after my skincare, I will go in with one even layer of this on the skin. Before it fully dries, I'll go on top of it with my foundation, and this really creates that even hydrated canvas that the foundation can adhere to, and it acts almost like a carrier for the pigment in the foundation. In my opinion, this is just such a great versatile product. My skin tends to act up whenever I'm traveling or I'm on the go, and I find that this gives me the moisture and the hydration and the barrier repair all in one. So if you are in the market for a good makeup prep product, a good mix-in product, or a hydrating milky barrier essence that is affordable, then I highly recommend this one. So I wiped off this side of my face, and as we talk about our next tip, I'm gonna go ahead and reapply this with the essence. Our next problem, you're not layering properly. So this tip kind of goes hand in hand with the first tip. Sometimes when you're applying your makeup and a new combination or just like a new product, do you sometimes find that it looks a little cakey? Maybe it dries in like splotches, or it doesn't blend as seamlessly as you imagined or have experienced previously with that same exact product. Trust me when I say, you guys, I have been there more often than not, especially when I have to test out a ton of different products all the time. And previously, if I had this experience, if a product wasn't laying the way that I thought it was supposed to, or, you know, if I tried it one time and then the second time it just wasn't working for me, I'd kind of write it off and then think it was a bad product. I mean, what other conclusion was I going to come to? But I've gotten into the habit of testing products multiple times with multiple different products and makeup routines at a time to really get a feel for every individual product. And that is because sometimes it's not the product's fault necessarily, but the way that it's being used. So there are a couple of different subcategories here when I'm talking about products not layering properly. The first part is if two products that you're using, say your primer and your foundation, don't work together, maybe look at the ingredients. Is it silicone or water-based? If they're incompatible, like water and silicone, consider switching one out for a more compatible partner. Now, this is not exclusive. It's not like every single silicone-based product is not going to work with a water-based one and vice versa, but it is possible that it could be hindering the performance of one of the products. Okay, so how do you determine if a product is silicone-based or water-based? So with silicone products, they will have ingredients that end in cone or conol, silane, siloxane. So for example, dimethicone, trimethicone, and cyclopentasiloxane. Those products are going to be higher on the ingredient list. And just as a little fun side note to make things a little bit more complicated, water-based products will have water or aqua as the first ingredient, but it doesn't always mean that it's water-based. Some silicone-based products will have water or aqua at the top of the list, but it's followed closely behind with different silicones. So that is a little bit confusing. But if it's water-based, the following ingredients are typically something like glycerin, ethahexyl palmitite, or even water-soluble substances like alcohol, humectants, emollients, and that is a key indicator that they are water-based. And also you can ask Google as well. And also a side note is water-based formulas can include silicones, but they won't be the primary ingredients. As an example, Say Glowy Super Gel. This one is water-based, as well as the Milk Hydro Grip. And there's also oil-based products, but it's a lot more rare when it comes to makeup these days. And as a little tip, instead of having to look at all of the ingredients list for all of these products, when I get a new product, I typically will write on the bottom of it either a W or an S, so I know if it's water-based or if it's silicone-based, and I will just match up my products that way. Now, another way to figure out how to layer products properly is to play around with your layering techniques. So for example, a concealer may work better on top of a foundation or underneath one. Same thing with a cream blush or a bronzer or even a powder. Maybe your unique skin will react better to underpainting and it'll look a lot less heavy if you underpaint. That's just kind of the nature of it. I had never heard of underpainting until the last couple of years, and I tried it and I love it for some of my routines. But then for other routines like today's, I go in with concealer afterwards to just kind of do detail work. I would definitely suggest to consider doing a new technique that feels a little bit foreign to you just to see how it looks on your skin. So here is another example for you. So I've learned that with a lot of cream blushes, in the summertime, I can layer it on top of my powder, and this will do two things for me. It'll create a powder layer between my skin and the cream, thus making my oils less prominent whenever the day goes on. My oils just are not accentuated as badly because there's that extra layer of protection of that powder that they have to go through before mixing with the cream blush. And the second part of this is that if I do this technique, then it'll make the powder on my face look a bit less powdery and it'll melt down, give like that sheen or hydrated look that a cream can on the skin, which then gives the illusion of less makeup. Another tip that I've talked about in previous videos is letting each layer of makeup dry between doing layers, especially if they're not powder. It is really crucial to how it's going to sit on the skin. So the reason this is important, so not allowing your makeup to dry between layers can really cause uneven coverage and application, and sometimes even dark spots where it's still wet and then it turns into like a harder layering process because you have to kind of go in and fix that mistake versus just taking like a minute to let everything set down, maybe work on your brows, maybe work on your eyes while you let your complexion dry. And if you don't have time to let your makeup dry, because I totally get it, I've been there, then you can use something like a portable little fan or even just like a handheld fan. I always have this one around whenever I'm doing my makeup, and just dry it a little bit before continuing on. Also, something to consider is that when it comes to complexion, sometimes letting your foundation and concealer dry a little bit and then blending it will give you a better understanding of the actual coverage. And it also lets you control exactly where the coverage is focused. So for some concealers, if they're a little bit more hydrating, I will spread it onto the skin, let it dry a bit before I blend it out completely, because that will focus the coverage in the area where I put it, but it also allows allows me to not have to work so hard and kind of disturb the makeup underneath. So this also can mean in turn less layers of makeup and more realistic amounts. That is why you see sometimes with makeup artists going in with concealer, they'll use something that's a little fluffier because it diffuses the product onto the skin and allows the product to dry quicker since it's coming onto the skin in thinner layers. I find that it just creates more of a natural skin look versus stamping a thick layer of concealer in with a sponge and then having to add and add and add because the sponge is soaking it up because the product is too wet still. The next problem that I see a lot of people doing, because I noticed it whenever I realized that I was doing the same exact thing, is that you are not accentuating and amplifying your unique face shape. So what do I mean by this? The same contour techniques may not work for your face the same way that it works for half of the influencers out there that may have a rounder face, a more pointed face, a more square face. If you see someone do a makeup technique on themselves and then you try it on yourself, of course you're going to feel disappointed when it doesn't look exactly the same as it did on that person. But here's the thing, you shouldn't feel bad about this. Everybody has a unique face shape and needs and goals for their makeup. The trick, honestly, is just to find a technique that makes you feel the way you thought those other techniques would make you feel. Because at the end of the day, you put makeup on to look and feel good. I mean, so what if you have to contour differently? So let me show you guys what I mean. So I'm going to be contouring and kind of bronzing my face at the same time. And I have learned that contouring my more full, more rounded face, the same way that someone who has a very angular face, maybe they have super structured cheekbones, it just doesn't make sense. It's not going to look the same on me because I'm not working with the same shadows on my unique face. For a very, very, very long time, I was doing the streak of bronzer on the side of my face, like cutting my face in half that way. And from the side, it definitely will give you that illusion that it's more contoured and structured, but it won't look like it's natural to my face. It'll obviously look like, okay, you're getting that look from makeup. So for me, I started watching more videos about Asian faces, more round faces. I'm slightly pointy here, but for the most part, I have fuller cheeks. So I have learned that a face shape like mine really, really benefits from contouring vertically. It slims my face, my profile. It like shades the more widened area down here, and it gives me a little bit more of like that snatched look that I'm looking for. I've also learned that blush placement is very different for me as well. So I've learned that putting blush on more of the front area of my face is way more flattering than if I put it as like a streak upwards towards my temple, because again, I have more fuller cheeks. I don't have as much sculpt. I don't have as much lift going on there. And putting blush up towards the temples does nothing for me if I don't have a structured cheekbone to accentuate to begin with. I also find that whenever I put more blush on the front of my face, it takes away the attention on the sides of my face, which again kind of makes the front of my face a little bit more full and the sides a little bit more slim. Also, if I put the blush a little bit higher towards the corner of my eye, it gives me that lifted effect that I expect if I were to put it all the way up my temples if I had a more angular face. And the same thing goes for my eyeshadows. So I cannot do eyeshadow the same way someone with more deep set creases, deep set eyes can. I have smaller eyes, verging on more of a hooded eye as I get older, and I can do makeup techniques that complement that. One of my absolute favorite tricks to do is to use more of a matte medium brown to kind of fake more depth on the eyelid. This kind of looks from the front like my eyes are a bit more deep set than they are, and I like to bring the actual eyeshadow colors way higher than my natural crease because this makes my eyes look so much bigger. It makes it look like I have way more eyelid space than I do, and when I'm smiling, then you can still see the eye makeup. So to wrap up this this point, you can change techniques as you go. I used to love blush across the face. Now I kind of just like it right here, fuller on my cheekbones. It really just depends on what you feel like makes you look the best in that moment in time. And I will say there are so many more how-to videos from actual professional makeup artists that cater to people with smaller eyelids, with smaller faces, rounder faces. You just have to find the people that really mesh with you and what you're looking for. This next mistake seems so obvious, but I still think that it warrants being said because it's something that we may kind of forget about because it seems so obvious. So my next mistake is that you're using the wrong shade for the results that you're looking for. I have fallen victim to this a lot of times. I really thought for a second there that bronzer just wasn't for me, or my only option was to just look like I had a streak of tan on my face. But I've actually learned that, as you can see, I have to go in with a shade lighter than what I think that I need. And I find when I do that, that always gives me a more natural bronze, like it's meant to be there and it could be a natural bronze. And I think a lot of this also has to do with the fact that we have more of a clear separation of what's a bronzer and what's a contour. But this also goes for blush. Now, again, I want to say that you can use any color of anything really on your face that you want. But if we're talking like you want the most natural, most flattering looking makeup that looks like natural skin, then it's important to find products or colors that you think make it look like it emphasizes your natural beauty. I think a telltale sign of using a product that's not meant for your complexion is if it's too hard to blend. So for instance, if you are very fair and you're using a deep berry shade of blush and you cannot blend it in, it looks splotchy, it's just not looking natural on you, maybe that shade is just not meant to look natural on you. Darker, richer, berry toned of blush could be made for people with darker complexions. And on the flip side, super light, very white based blushes could be made for those that have super fair skin, that find that anything that has deep saturation is just too intense for their liking. I find that looking at marketing photos with models of different skin tones can be really helpful, but put more belief into your past experience and knowledge. I always recommend to go into the stores if you can and swatch them, see how you feel about it. If you really have to work with something by using the tiniest amount and it's still a little bit difficult to use, maybe there is something in the store that will work a little bit better and give you the same results. It just really is a little bit of trial and error and getting to know what works for your complexion and your skin tone. It really, again, comes down to just getting to know your complexion. Now, the last mistake that I see happen very often is that you're picking the wrong formulas. So seasons, as we all know, can really affect this. It's not necessarily a bad formula, but the wrong time for it. So this is where we kind of see the timeline of brand launches. We see brands coming out with more waterproof, more sweat-proof products in the summertime, and then we see more glassy, dewy skin, more hydrated products coming out during the winter time. So for me as an oily skin girl living in a humid climate, I really stay away from super emollient products in the summertime since I know that my skin will get oily faster, but I do have them in my collection and they work flawlessly for me when I'm in a colder, drier climate. And lately, you guys have been seeing me test out and really recommend a lot of tubing mascaras because in the summertime, I have learned that I really love a waterproof mascara layered with a tubing mascara instead of just a waterproof one because I'll be sweating more, I have a lot more creasing going on my skin, and sometimes a waterproof mascara that is perfect in the winter time or fall time just isn't going to cut it for me when I'm in really hot climate. And not just climate, but even just general weather. I find that I don't wear a lot of like crazy glossy formulas when it comes to like my lip products or even my complexion products during hurricane season because it is rainy season. It is raining on and off all day, every day, and it's more windy, it's more rainy. And on the flip side, I like to wear heavier powders in the summertime because I know that means the powder will mesh down and melt down into my skin as the day progresses way better and way faster than if I wore that same exact powder the same exact way in the dead of winter. So my point with this last one is that the same exact products they can wear completely different throughout the year. Personally, for me, I think that it's important to recognize what you're looking for in that moment in time with your makeup and just honor that. It's a lot easier to just go with what works for you, what you know actually will give you that effect that you're looking for versus trying really hard to make a viral product work for you when you know that in the grand scheme of things, it's just not gonna cut it for you. Just because someone with super dry skin looks incredible with a very emollient skin tint in the summertime and they make it look easy, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna have the same experience. So those are the 5 things that I've noticed I've had trouble with, and I hope that this video helped you in some capacity with feeling more confident in the makeup that you own and just encourages you to explore it more and play around with it. Because at the end of the day, makeup is meant to be fun and something that makes you feel good. Here is another video that YouTube actually thinks that you're gonna enjoy from me based on what you've been viewing recently. But until next time, you guys, I hope you take care of yourselves and I will see you very soon. Bye.